Previously on Chase Chats.
What's up, guys? It's our first broadcast of Chase Chats.
Join the war. Help take down fake chats on Twitter.
We're going to take it back to the Heisman voting 10 years ago. We'll go over the major candidates, whether it's a star quarterback, electric running back, or who the is that?
I'm sure you could put him out in the wilderness somewhere and he could be running around catching animals.
That's Stanford fullback Owen Marisick. We might as well start with him and how in the world he received multiple first place votes. The summer before that season, Stanford head coach Jim Harbaugh called Marisick the perfectly engineered football player. And the main reason for such a title is this fullback also starting at linebacker for one of the top teams in the country. To do that in this day and age, start full time at two positions, is almost unheard of. He really made his name in the biggest games of the season, as any Heisman candidate would. Against 13th ranked Arizona, he was out there for over 100 plays. And against Notre Dame, he rushed for a touchdown and returned a pick six in a span of 13 seconds. Basically, you could plug this guy into any decade of football, and he'd probably produce incredibly well. I guess that's how a fullback even gets Heisman votes in the first place. He did win the Paul Hornung Award for the most versatile player in college football, but unfortunately, he only lasted a few years in the NFL. In 2010, Andy Dalton led TCU to an undefeated season, although they didn't end up playing in the championship game because Auburn and Oregon also went undefeated. Looking back, Dalton's performance kinda screams under the radar. When you're the quarterback of a team that never lost and you're performing well week in and week out, you'd think he'd finish a little higher than 9th in the voting. Next up, we have Nevada's Colin Kaepernick finishing 8th. He didn't receive any first place votes like Dalton did, and his passing stats aren't the most eye-popping, but he did rush for 20 touchdowns that year, and that dual threat ability vaulted him into the second round of the draft. I'd say Ryan Mallett for Arkansas was basically in the same camp as Kaepernick, someone who garnered some decent votes, but nobody actually voted him number one. With a big arm having success in the SEC, the Patriots drafted him in the third round as maybe what you can point to as the first potential Brady replacement. But as we all know, Brady has long outlasted Mallett in not just New England, but also the NFL. Denard Robinson. Has he won the Heisman Trophy in just 2 weeks?
No.
That headline came out after Robinson eclipsed 500 total yards in a win over Notre Dame. Michigan first recruited him as a defensive back out of high school, but he declined until they said they'd take him as a quarterback too. No matter the position, he was just a pure athletic football player. But not too long after that Notre Dame game, things went downhill. Michigan had a terrible second half of the season and finished 7-6. He started the next 2 years for Michigan, but that sophomore season is definitely the one that stands out, with him finishing 6th in Heisman voting. After wrapping up his senior season, he was willing to play any position in the NFL, so the Jaguars selected him in the 5th round as a running back. After some injury problems, he flamed out quickly in the NFL and last played for the AAF. Now finally, after all these quarterbacks, we have a wide receiver. Justin Blackmon was just ridiculous that year. He scored at least one touchdown and tallied up at least 100 receiving yards in every single game of the year. Not one team could shut him down. And even while playing in the Big 12 that season is still remarkable. On top of all that, he reignited a 26-year-old college quarterback in Brandon Weeden. And while constantly drawing up comparisons to former Oklahoma State receiver Des Bryant, Blackmon pretty much won up the former star in every single way. He finished with 20 touchdowns, over 1,700 yards, and over 100 receptions. In the NFL, Blackmon had a terribly underwhelming career, marked with multiple DUIs that kept him off the field. In fourth place, Kellen Moore was the first ever Heisman finalist from Boise State. By the time Moore was a freshman, he was calling his own plays. And when I say freshman, I mean freshman in high school. Now at 31, he's gone from calling plays at Prosser High School to calling plays for the Dallas Cowboys as their offensive coordinator. All season long in 2010, he was a Heisman candidate. And out of all the quarterbacks on this list, he threw for the most touchdowns with 35 to go along with just 6 interceptions. He led Boise State to a top 10 finish and certainly got some consideration with 40 first place votes. When I think of the 2010 college football season, one of the biggest things that comes to mind was the energy surrounding that Oregon football team and its best player, LaMichael James. That Oregon offense went absolutely bonkers that season. They averaged 47 points a game, which was the highest in the FBS. After being named the Pac-10 Offensive Freshman of the Year, James led the nation in rushing yards, yards from scrimmage, and touchdowns in his sophomore season. I think the best way to put his season into words is this. He was basically a threat to score anywhere, at any time. Although he was on the smaller side at 5'8", he just had this rare explosiveness that was perfected in Chip Kelly's offense. James led the Ducks to their first ever national championship game and scored 2 touchdowns in that game. He was the only non-quarterback out of the 4 Heisman finalists, and he received 22 first place votes, which was less than Moore, but he received almost double the amount of second place votes. The 49ers drafted James in the second round of the 2012 draft, but he never found that extra gear in the NFL and was out of the league by 2016. In his sophomore year at Stanford, Andrew Luck finished as the Heisman runner-up. He wasn't just the best pure passing prospect in college football, he was more than that. As you can see here with him laying out Sharice Wright on a fumble return. I think a lot of people became Andrew Luck fans after that play. He was big, strong, and athletic. He could pass all over the field and scramble when needed. Jim Harbaugh loved Luck so much he compared the quarterback to his wife. I was thinking the other night that 2 people in my life, my wife and our quarterback Andrew Luck, have a lot in common in that they're just both perfect. With most people you say if they only didn't do that, or they didn't do this, or you wish they could do this, or you wish they could do that. But I don't do that with my wife Sarah or Andrew Luck. They are just absolutely perfect the way they are. For a football coach, that's pretty great. To have a great wife and a great quarterback. Luck led Stanford to a 12-1 record and blowout Orange Bowl victory. He was the projected number 1 pick in the 2011 draft, but he elected to stay in school for his junior year, where he once again finished as the runner-up in the Heisman vote. He still went number 1 overall in the 2012 draft, and when healthy made the Colts a consistent playoff contender until he surprisingly retired before the 2019 season. A lot of the talk back in 2010 surrounding Cam Newton had to do with the off-the-field issues. There was a major controversy surrounding his father asking for money from Mississippi State in reward for a transfer. Despite all that, Newton played like the best player in college football. He threw for 30 touchdowns, rushed for 20 more, ranked first in yards per attempt, and 12th in rushing yards among all players. All of this happened with him playing the prior year at Blinn College, which I talk about in more detail on my players who have won the Heisman and NFL MVP video, so check that out if you want to learn more. Newton's Heisman moment occurred against undefeated LSU, where he pretty much ran through the entire defense for a 49-yard touchdown. Offensive coordinator Gus Malzahn summed up Newton's season perfectly, saying, "He can make things right when they're not right." Newton eventually became the first player in SEC history to pass for over 2,000 yards and rush for over 1,000 yards. Auburn ended up going 14-0 and beat Oregon in the national championship. Newton went number 1 overall in the 2011 draft and has been with the Panthers ever since. I might do another video like this in the future on a different Heisman year or maybe NFL MVP year, so please like the video for some feedback on if you would want to see something like this done again. As always, I appreciate the support, and remember to sub it up.